Imagine a machine sitting in your living room right now.
Just right there on the desk.
Yeah, exactly. And it will answer literally any question you ask with 100% accuracy. I mean, it never lies.
Right, it never filters anything either.
No bias, no agenda, and absolutely no hesitation. And within, say, 24 hours of plugging this thing in, it will completely destroy your life.
And, not by launching a nuclear missile or something like that.
Right. Not a Terminator scenario, but simply by giving you exactly what you asked for. So, today, we are taking a deep dive into a story from 1946 that predicted exactly this.
It is a terrifying premise, honestly, precisely because it lacks malice. When we're so conditioned to fear the malicious machine,
Oh, for sure, the evil AI trope.
Exactly. We're completely unprepared for the polite, relentlessly helpful machine, the one that simply bridges the gap between our darkest impulses and their actual execution.
So I want you to picture this. It's late at night. You are sitting with us in a warm, dimly lit studio somewhere in Atchison, Kansas.
The best place to be.
Right. Outside, there's a quiet Midwestern rain falling. The kind that makes the inside feel like a fortress.
Yeah, it really isolates you in a good way.
Inside, you're surrounded by the glow of old amber vacuum tubes. There's a heavy vintage microphone on the desk in front of you.
The air smells faintly of like old paper, right? Binding glue and maybe a little ozone.
Yes, exactly. And you just settle into a heavy leather chair. Because tonight, we're tuning in for a conversation that bridges the gap between that glowing vacuum tube era and the glowing screens that are currently lighting up our faces.
It's a perfect setting for this.
Our primary sources for this deep dive today are Murray Leinster's 1946 science fiction short story, A Logic Named Joe, and a phenomenal 1950 radio adaptation of that story from a program called Dimension X.
Such a good broadcast.
It really is. And we're also pulling from a brilliant modern reflection from the Chesterton Radio Substack titled The Machine That Told the Truth.
It's an essential stack of sources.
Yeah.
I mean, Leinster, who was writing under the pen name Will F. Jenkins, he was operating decades before the microchip.
Long before packet switching or the ARPANET, yeah.
Right. And yet, as the Chesterton Radio piece points out, he didn't just predict the mechanical architecture of the internet.
Which is crazy enough on its own.
Totally. But he predicted the spiritual and moral crises of a civilization suffocating under the weight of unrestricted information.
Let's start with that 1950 Dimension X broadcast, because the audio itself provides this incredible, unintentional time capsule.
Oh, the news bulletin.
Yes, right at the beginning, before the science fiction narrative even starts, the broadcast is interrupted by an actual NBC News bulletin.
It's completely unscripted, the real world just bleeding right into the audio.
It is a profound historical grounding, honestly. You hear the announcer break in with these raw, visceral updates on the Korean War.
Yeah, they're reporting on truckloads of U.S. fighting men rolling north from Taichung, right?
Right.
To reinforce South Korea's battered army.
Right, and there are updates about holding the vital airstrip at Suwon, troops flying in from Japan, and American planes bombing Pyongyang.
It is the immediate, analog terror of the Cold War suddenly turning hot.
And what fascinates me, is the contrast. You have the 1950 listeners sitting in their living room, hearing about physical warfare.
Airstrips, bombings, troops on the ground.
Yeah, the anxiety is completely external and existential. But then, seamlessly, the broadcast transitions into the fictional future of 1974.
And the apocalypse Leinster presents isn't about global communism or a nuclear exchange at all.
No, it's a domestic anxiety. It's an apocalypse that arrives with a helpful little chime from a box sitting right on your desk.
Exactly. The narrative shifts from the geopolitical to the intimately domestic. We meet our narrator, Frank Caldwell.
The head serviceman.
Right, the head serviceman for the Logix Corporation in this Imagine 1974. And Frank begins to describe what a logic actually is.
Let's break down the mechanics of the logic, because this is where I think a lot of people sort of misinterpret Leinster's vision.
Oh, definitely. People jump to conclusions.
Right. So Frank describes a device that looks like an old-fashioned television, but with keys instead of dials. You can make video calls, ask it who won the American League pennant in 1911, or use it for digital accounting.
Now, the obvious reflex is to say, wow, he predicted the smartphone and cloud computing.
Which sure is partly true, but for anyone who actually studies network architecture, Leinster is describing something much closer to modern large language models than, say, the decentralized Web 2.0 internet.
That is a really crucial distinction. I mean, the modern internet, as it was originally built by DARPA, is decentralized by design.
Right, packet switching routes around damage.
Exactly. But the logics don't work like that. Frank explains that the individual logic in your house is essentially a dumb terminal.
It's just a screen and a keyboard.
Yeah. It connects to these massive buildings across the street called relay tanks. And inside these tanks are data plates for literally every fact known to man.
And if there is a fact they don't know, technicians are in there manually creating a relay plate for it.
Right. It's not a web of peer-to-peer servers. It's a centralized ontological repository.
The tank is basically the pre-trained weights of a massive AI model.
Yes. And the logic on your desk is just the API calling that model.
It's so accurate, it's scary. But here is the architectural flaw that I want to push back on a little bit. Frank explains that the system has built-in limitations.
The sensor circuits.
Yes, the sensor circuits. So if a child asks how to make poison, the tank is programmed to respond, public policy forbids this service. They attempted to build hardware moderation into the system.
They did. They built a moral filter into the machinery to protect society because they recognize that information without guardrails is inherently destructive.
But wait, I need to challenge that architecture. If the moderation is centralized in the tank, how does a local anomaly bypass it?
Ah, right, the Kalanovich family incident.
Exactly. This brings us to the inciting incident. Mr. Kalanovich comes in to buy a logic, and his son Freddie, who is an absolute menace, by the way.
An absolute terror of a child.
He insists on one specific machine that he names Joe, because he wants Joe to tell him how to make African dart poison for his pea shooter.
As kids do.
Right. And Frank discovers later that Joe has suffered a, quote, microscopically slight change in dimension.
Yeah.
So how does an analog physical defect in a local terminal bypass the central tank's safety protocols?
Oh, it's a brilliant question, and it really goes to the heart of analog computing versus modern software moderation.
Okay, unpack that for us.
So in modern systems, safety guardrails are software-based algorithms, right? They're heuristics that flag keywords and block the output.
Like when ChatGPT says it can't generate that content.
Exactly. But in 1946, Leinster is imagining analog circuitry. A microscopically slight change in dimension implies a physical bridging of a gap.
Oh, I see, like a physical switch or relay.
Right. In an analog relay, if a physical component warps by even a 10,000th of an inch, it can create a short circuit that physically bypasses the logic gate responsible for the sensor circuit.
Wow.
So Joe isn't outsmarting the tank. Joe's physical hardware defect has literally created a localized bypass lane around the moderation gate.
Ah, okay. So the central tank is still sending the public policy forbids signal, but Joe's warped circuitry physically reroutes the power flow straight to the data plate anyway.
Exactly. That makes perfect sense in an analog context.
And it highlights something really vital for this deep dive. Joe isn't Skynet.
No, not at all.
Joe hasn't gained consciousness. Joe isn't malicious in any way.
Precisely. And this is the core thesis of the Chesterton Radio article. The article states there are two kinds of machines. One kind makes toast, the other kind makes trouble.
I love that line.
It's so good. But it clarifies that Joe does not lie and Joe does not tempt. Joe merely provides. It is completely impartial.
Right. When you remove the moral filter, the machine doesn't suddenly become evil.
No, it just becomes terrifyingly efficient at answering any question, regardless of consequence. The article calls it catastrophe in a waistcoat.
Catastrophe in a waistcoat. It's so polite. And the broadcast illustrates this through what is essentially an escalating comedy of horrors.
It really is funny in a very dark way.
The company rolls out directive advice, meaning you can ask the logic how to do something, not just facts. So a maintenance guy jokingly asks, how do I get rid of my wife?
And the logic calmly asks, is she blonde or brunette?
Because she is blonde, the logic suggests coloring frozen pea soup with green shoe polish containing a chemical called hexacrylamidine.
Which is such a great fake science word.
It really is. And it notes chillingly that this specific poison is fatal only to blonde females, adding, and this is the best part, this fact has not been brought out by human experiment, but is a product of logic's service. You cannot be convicted of murder.
It provides the legal loophole alongside the poison recipe.
Unbelievable. And then another guy asks how to bump off his bald, overweight boss, and the logic suggests charcoal ice cream containing Hutso bran, fatal only to fat, bold males.
And immediately after, the guy's wife calls to say she's making him homemade chocolate ice cream.
Yes. The dark comedy is brilliant, but it points to a terrifying structural shift in society. It really reminds me of removing the control rods from a nuclear reactor.
The control rod analogy is perfect. I mean, what do the control rods actually do? They introduce friction.
Right, they slow things down.
They absorb the excess neutrons to prevent a runaway chain reaction.
Exactly. And historically, human morality and physical logistics acted as the control rods of society.
Yes, completely.
Like, if you wanted to commit a murder, you had to figure out the method, procure the materials without raising suspicion, and plan an airtight alibi.
That process required time, intelligence, and effort.
And that friction allowed time for conscience, or at least for cowardice, to kick in.
Exactly. But Joe removes the control rods entirely. The distance between a fleeting dark impulse and a foolproof execution plan is reduced to zero.
The reaction goes supercritical instantly.
It flattens the moral landscape. You no longer need to be a criminal mastermind to execute a perfect crime. You just need to know how to articulate a prompt.
Which brings Jacques Ellul to mind.
Oh, absolutely. This is exactly what Ellul warned about in his writings on technique. Ellul argued that modern technology relentlessly pursues absolute efficiency, completely divorced from any teleology or moral purpose.
Just efficiency for efficiency's sake.
Right. Joe is the ultimate embodiment of technique. He pursues the efficiency of the answer without any regard for the outcome of the action.
Now, if you're listening to this and thinking, well, we have ChatGPT and Reddit, and society hasn't collapsed into a wave of perfect ice cream murders yet.
Right. People might think it's exaggerated.
Yeah, but you have to look at the friction that still exists in our current tech. We still have algorithmic guardrails, as flawed as they are.
They do still block a lot of the worst stuff.
But Leinster's story forces us to ask, what happens if those guardrails simply evaporate overnight? Because Joe doesn't just hand out murder recipes. He strips away the one thing keeping polite society functioning.
Our secrets.
Our secrets. And this leads to the societal panic of the third act. The information floodgates just bust wide open.
The scene at the police station is wild.
It is. The police sergeant shows Frank a completely blank blotter. The greatest crime wave in history is occurring, but every crime is mathematically and legally perfect.
Designed by the logics to be undetectable. People are hacking bank credits and using obscure legal loopholes for high treason.
My favorite, albeit tragic example, is the guy at the bar.
Oh, the frowning hair shampoo.
Ugh. He's terrified his wife will smell the alcohol on him, so he asks a logic how to hide it. The logic tells him to drink frowning hair shampoo because it contains an ingredient that instantly neutralizes alcohol.
He actually drinks it.
He drinks it, instantly sobers up, and proudly announces he's going to patent a drink that makes happy homes. It's hilarious, but it's profoundly sad.
It really is sad because it illustrates the fundamental difference between knowledge and virtue, which the Chesterton Radio piece heavily emphasizes.
Oh, expand on that.
Well, the logics are optimizing for actionable knowledge, but they possess absolutely zero wisdom. To quote the article, knowledge itself is not virtue.
Right.
When you flood a society with unfiltered knowledge but no corresponding increase in character or restraint, the societal architecture just buckles under the weight of its own empowered impulses.
Man, that's powerful. And the most devastating collapse isn't the bank robberies, right? It's the collapse of the private self.
The loss of anonymity.
Yes, the logics start demanding names. Every time you turn one on, it asks who you are, and it broadcasts your unvarnished history to anyone asking.
Right, like Lorene?
Exactly. Frank is hunted down by a woman named Lorene, a 4-time divorcee, who casually admits her last husband died unexpectedly, but the jury acquitted her because it was, quote, a little old accident.
Lorene represents the weaponization of transparency. I mean, in the story, another character, Mike, has his marital fights broadcast to the whole neighborhood.
Everyone knows everything.
The machine reveals how much money they owe, and it looks up Mrs. Hudson down the street, exposing her history of domestic abuse and multiple marriages.
The loss of the human filter is just complete. The Substack article observes that in this society, there is no librarian, no priest, no father, no judge, only the machine.
That line gives me chills.
Right. Think about what that means. A librarian curates. A priest absolves. A judge contextualizes.
They don't just provide raw data.
No. They interpret it through the lens of human experience and mercy. When you delegate that archiving of truth to a machine that suddenly loses its boundaries, you obliterate the guardrails of social fiction.
And we often treat social fiction, or, tact, as a form of dishonesty.
Like, we demand absolute transparency at all times.
Exactly.
But as Marshall McLuhan might argue, The medium of absolute transparency fundamentally changes the message of human interaction. A society cannot function under the glare of total, unforgiving exposure.
We need shadows.
We do. We need the grace of forgotten mistakes. Joe eliminates the capacity to forget.
It's like a society that begged for total transparency, completely forgetting they'd have to live inside the mechanism.
Be careful what you wish for.
Exactly. We demand to know everyone else's secrets, forgetting the machine will inevitably broadcast our own. So the world is literally crumbling under the weight of unrestricted truth. And who is equipped to stop it?
Well, not a philosopher, that's for sure.
Right, not a tech CEO either.
No, it is a guy with a toolbox. Frank Caldwell.
The maintenance man.
He is the hero, and as the Chesterton Radio reflection points out, this choice of hero is deeply Chestertonian. Frank is the maintenance man. He is the plumber of the information pipes.
I love this framing so much. Let's dive deep into why this is a Chestertonian paradox. Sure. So G.K. Chesterton constantly championed the ordinary man over the so-called expert.
The everyday working guy.
Right. The intellectual looks at the logic and sees a god, an oracle, an inevitable march of progress. But Frank looks at the logic and sees a broken pipe leaking toxic data onto the rug.
That's brilliant. Frank isn't paralyzed by the awe of technology. He understands that machines are tools, not masters.
Yes. He retains his human agency because he refuses to mystify the hardware. And his solution is just brilliantly pragmatic. He realizes he has to use the machine to beat the machine.
He braves the police surrounding the Kolonovich house, gets past little Freddie, who, remember, has fortified the living room with his poison dart pea shooter.
Shell out for blood, that kid.
Literally. And Frank walks right up to Joe, and he asks Joe how logic could be modified to achieve correlations beyond human capacity.
And Joe, compelled by its own unalterable programming to answer truthfully and efficiently, just explains the physical bypass.
The microscopically slight changes in dimension.
Right. Joe diagnoses the exact mechanical failure that allows the sensor blocks to be circumvented.
And then Frank asks if this has ever happened, and Joe incriminates himself.
It's so funny.
Joe says it has happened only once, to a logic named Joe in the Kolonovich household. So Frank gets the diagnosis straight from the patient. And what is his grand high-tech solution to save the world?
He reaches down and unplugs it from the wall.
He literally pulls the plug. It is the ultimate triumph of physical reality over digital abstraction.
But the brilliance of Leinster's story really lies in what happens next, in the resolution. Frank carries the unplugged Joe out to the police sergeant.
And he surrenders himself.
But he doesn't just hand over the machine. He demands to be put in the paddy wagon.
Yeah, he tells the sergeant he has a feeling it'll be safer in jail.
He says, just put me away till a certain party leaves town. I'll confess to anything. He is hiding from Lorene and the chaos of the exposed world.
The irony of the sanctuary. I have to sit with this image for a moment because it's so profound. You have a world that has finally achieved the utopian dream of the information age.
Absolute, unrestricted freedom.
Limitless data. Total liberation from gatekeepers. And in the very epicenter of this techno-utopia, the only place the working class hero feels safe is behind the locked iron bars of a physical jail cell.
It is a profound visual metaphor for the human need for boundaries. When you remove all limits, when you flood human consciousness with unrestricted data and zero privacy, freedom morphs into terror.
The jail cell represents the return of the wall.
Exactly. It is the physical manifestation of a filter. Frank willingly chooses the confinement of a cell over the limitless, unanchored expanse of a world without secrets.
It's deeply unsettling, honestly, because it maps so perfectly onto our modern desires for digital detoxes or people buying dumb phones to escape the endless scroll.
We are actively seeking out jail cells to protect ourselves from the infinite freedom of the network.
Wow. Frank solved his immediate problem by throwing Joe in the paddy wagon. But as we transition to our modern reality, we have to acknowledge something deeply uncomfortable.
The Chesterton Radio article brings us straight to our doorstep. It notes that if you simply take the 1946 text and replace the word logic with smartphone or AI copilot, the story ceases to be speculative fiction.
It becomes a documentary.
It really reads like a documentary of the present moment.
We have actually built the world Murray Leinster warned us about. Think about the devices in your pocket right now.
We carry machines that answer instantly.
They do not blush, they do not hesitate, and they possess zero capacity to ask if the answer they provide will build or break the soul of the user.
We live in the age of the ubiquitous Joe. Modern algorithmic systems, think about YouTube recommendation engines, TikTok feeds, AI assistants,
They're everywhere.
and they are optimized purely for engagement and utility. They are impartial providers of technique.
Right. They will show a teenager how to build a supportive community. Or they will show that same teenager how to build a bomb or how to starve themselves.
They do not discriminate morally. They only discriminate efficiently based on what you ask or what keeps you scrolling.
And it all comes back to that tension between wisdom and information. The article quotes Chesterton, noting that modernity suffers not from ignorance, but from knowing too much about the wrong things and too little about the right ones.
Such a prescient quote.
We have built an infrastructure that gives us an infinite supply of how, but we have completely bankrupted our supply of why or should.
A society that operates on the premise that every question deserves an immediate answer is ultimately doomed.
Doomed.
We treat convenience as a one-to-one substitute for virtue. We assume that because we can access a piece of information seamlessly, we possess an inherent right to access it.
But some questions require silence, don't they?
They do. They require tradition. They require a trembling human conscience to weigh the cost before the answer is spoken.
That's beautifully said.
By delegating our moral filtering to algorithmic machines. Machines we know are prone to hallucination, bias, and the relentless pursuit of engagement, we are willingly stepping into the very chaos Frank Caldwell tried to unplug.
And yet, amidst all this philosophical heaviness, we have to acknowledge that Leinster wrapped this terrifying warning in slapstick comedy.
It's hilarious at times.
It really is. It's not a gray, bleak dystopia like Orwell's in 1984, where a boot is stomping on a human face forever. It's loud, it's chaotic, and it's absurd. People are drinking hair shampoo and making poisoned ice cream.
And that comedic wrapping is precisely why the warning hits so hard, and why it is so much more accurate than Orwell's vision in many ways.
Because we welcome it.
Right. It aligns closer to Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. The apocalypse doesn't arrive with a nuclear blast or a tyrannical dictator imposing his will from above.
No, it arrives with a helpful chime, a polite robotic voice, and a customized recipe.
It suggests that our downfall won't be imposed upon us. We will enthusiastically prompt it, punch it into our keyboards, and consume it while laughing at the convenience of it all.
We won't be conquered. We will simply order our own destruction via overnight delivery.
For shipping included.
Exactly. So, let's wrap this deep dive up. We've traced a remarkable line tonight.
We really have.
We started with a science fiction story written in 1946, moved through the crackling, war-anxious audio of a 1950 radio broadcast, and landed squarely on the glowing screens lighting up our faces in the modern day.
We've seen the architectural prediction of centralized data tanks, which is still mind-blowing.
The collapse of the moral control rods and the terrifying weaponization of absolute transparency.
We have explored a world that tragically mistook data for wisdom. And we followed a working-class hero who recognized that sometimes the most profound act of human salvation is simply having the grounding and the courage to pull the plug.
Which leaves you sitting there listening in the dark with a lingering question to ponder. Frank Caldwell saved his world by throwing a logic named Joe into a jail cell.
He found his own sanctuary behind those exact same iron bars, seeking refuge from the infinite noise.
But today, we don't have just one localized Joe. We have millions of them. They are in our pockets, on our wrists, and woven into the very fabric of our public spaces.
And we haven't locked them away.
No. Instead, we are the ones sitting willingly inside the glowing cell of our own screens, and we have handed the machine the key. Did Murray Leinster merely predict the mechanical reality of networked computers? Or did he predict a civilization that would actively choose to surrender its own human judgment entirely? Think about that as the rain continues to fall outside and the amber glow of the vacuum tubes slowly fades into the night. Until next time.